Hello and welcome to Makers of All, Master of None, and I want to start the video by apologizing to my mother for making an irresponsible financial decision. A Kawasaki Ninja 650. Not a fast bike, just a fast looking bike, and I promise I'll be safe. I've gotten my full A license after 2 years of having my A2 license back at university, but when I sold my previous bike, a CB500, I also had to move for a new job, and living away from home, I didn't really have the space or the money for another bike. Until now, where I have a garage where I can put it, but it's also not quite wide enough for my car and my bike, and I'm getting a little bit annoyed with having to move my bike in and out before I can use my car, especially as winter was approaching. I first started this project back in September of 2024, so riding season was coming to the end and it was getting a bit chilly. I did plan and have since gotten a top box for my bike as I intended to be a commuter bike. So I grabbed a brochure into Procreate and then used that to do a rough design. I then bought some 4x2s to make the frame, which I started off by splitting them into 2x2s first, cutting them to length, adding a 45-degree angle. I pre-drew some holes and just butt jointed them with some screws. The next day I decided it probably wasn't the best for my bike to be caked in sawdust, so from then on I moved the bike out of the way that I'm working on it. I wasn't quite happy with the stability of the frame at the moment, not surprised as it's just butt jointed with some screws, so I added in a vertical beam and started using joints, specifically half lap joints for the vertical brace, using the circular saw with a set depth and just slowly making a slot, cleaning with a chisel, and then repeating at the other side and on the brace. I then secure it with screws. Because I didn't know the exact length and I couldn't be bothered to work out using maths, attached it first, then used a handsaw to trim it flush. I also added in a block at the corners for extra stability and trimmed off the square corner for a neat look, where I forgot that a screw was already in there and gave me a bit of a scare with all the sparks.
I forgot there were screws.
I also did a slightly sketchy move when I was trimming the bottom of the frame. The base is next, so now I use my bike to measure out the distances, lay them out, and instead of using overlapping joints, this time I'm just cutting out some slots on the end piece so that the middle and side planks can wander as they're being screwed in place. The increased depth of the cut, it did take me a few tries to try and figure out what is the best way to cut it. I tried the table saw, I tried the jigsaw, I tried circular saw, I tried a handsaw until I realized I could just use the top of my table saw to try and level the cuts. Which is also the point where I started removing the splitter, which is probably not recommended, but in my case I don't really have a choice. I am super aware of my fingers and where they are at all times, so I don't chop them off accidentally. It seems like building a station for my flip saw is going to be one of my next woodworking projects when I get to my next woodworking project. I then place the OBS board on top, screw it down, and then trim it down a couple of times using different saws. I also then built a little ramp for it as well, which is a slanted cut and then just with an OBS board on top. Unfortunately, I have lost the footage of me testing this out in the garage because my hard drive failed and I can't move the footage across even though I can see it, which is slightly annoying, and you just have to take my word for it that I tested it before I actually put everything together, which is the next step. Going back to the side frame, I decided I wasn't particularly happy with the design as it is because I couldn't make up my mind on what to do. I then cut out a couple of pieces so I can then make a parallelogram so that I can extend the frame a little bit more so it's get a little bit more stable, but also makes the shape look a little bit more interesting. I'm not getting the hang of using the table saw method to get good joints, but I did accidentally cut one of the grooves too deep when I was setting the height, so I kind of went with that and just cut out some of the scrap pieces of plywood, glued it, filled it up, and then just used it like that. It was a little bit nerve-wracking cutting into the built frame itself because it's already built. If I mess it up, then I have a lot of work to do again. But luckily, it wasn't terrible. And by that I mean you can kind of fit it in. It's not a perfect fit and nothing is square, which is the main issue I'm going to have for the rest of the build. With the 2 side frames now ready, I can now start assembling the first half of the shed. The first was a very long and slow move of the base to where it's going to be because it is surprisingly heavy. Much more heavy than I thought it was going to be, at least. So that took a while, and also just dragging along and damaging the base. But once it's maneuvered into place with much difficulty, we also get the A-frames in to just get a judge of size on whether we actually did the right thing. Because even though I was measuring as I was going along, I didn't take exact measurements of the bike in terms of kind of the height in the middle and stuff like that. So we're just going to see what it looks like with the sides on. So I'm happy with the placement of the side frames. So once I had a quick measure, moved the bike out of the shed bay. Although I did run into a small issue when I was deciding on how to cut a couple of the pieces, as I'll explain now. One thing I want to point out with this flip saw that I have is that the fence is very temperamental and it's not very true. So every time I set up the fence, I have to measure it a couple of times to make sure that it is evenly consistent across, which takes a lot of time. There's also no grooves on the table saw either, which I can then run a miter fence or something across it, which probably contributes to the not straightness of this shed. Unfortunately, my table saw isn't quite big enough to do that cut, so I do have to do it in 2 pieces, one from one direction and then the other from the other direction, essentially. Where you can see nothing because it's dark now. This is one of my first ventures into properly using pocket screws, and I don't think I did it quite right. I don't think I kind of clamped the right distance from the end of the piece and the way it drilled out and then screwing the holes in. I just couldn't be bothered to actually make grooves up on the top now that it's already put up on the side. So pocket screw this. Luckily that piece didn't hit me in the head, otherwise this is going to be a very different story. The next day I cut out some strips to put on the edge of the frame just for aesthetic purposes, and then trimmed it to the correct angle. As well as cutting out some of the shiplap wood panels that I have gotten for the walls. I did make one error here which wasn't apparent at the time, but as it goes on I'll explain why that's a bad idea. So, you probably couldn't see very well from the side, but we now have an entire wall, which the gaps in here aren't super consistent. Like, what's that one doing there? And it's definitely not equal on both sides either. But we do have one more. We're going to trim this down using a saw and then maybe put the roof up at some point. So thinking either roof first or side wall first. Not sure which one to do first. But progress in like 2 hours. A wall. And I still have this entire bit to do. This is a big project. Okay, I know it was going to be a big project to start with, but for the rest of the afternoon, I just did one side of the wall. Nothing much to say here, other than I'm just cutting the pieces to length, leaving a little bit of room so that I can just trim off the end rather than being too short, because I don't particularly trust my cutting. I am doing the same as the first wall, which was just screwing in where I can on the support and putting in glue where the tongue and groove joints are. As you can see, it's getting a bit dark and you couldn't see much from that angle anyway, so I moved the camera inside the house. As you can see, this shed is also blocking my window out of the house, so that's going to be interesting as well. Once it's fully built, I probably don't have a view outside anymore, which is probably a good thing, a bad thing, not sure. You can see a lot more of my progress the next day after, and with all of the planks already cut out, it was a lot easier trying to put the pieces in. For the top bit, I was trying to conserve as much planks of wood as I can, so the shape looks a bit funky, but I'm just gonna trim it off with a multi-tool oscillator. So I did the left side, the right side, we also did the fun part which we left off earlier. Next bit is the roof, and it's mostly just an OBS board being cut into size. Just a friendly reminder to have your workpiece supported when you're cutting your boards, because otherwise that could happen. I added a 45-degree angle into one end of the board so that it sits a little bit nicer on the roof itself. But the real struggle again is just moving the board outside onto the shed and try and get it into position for a test fit.
Here, 30 degrees, fine. That one is the way I want it. That is to be flush with the beam.
So after a few more trims, it is finally the right angle and the right width and length of how I want the roof to be. The only issue was that when I put it on again, I put it on the wrong way around, so I had to do a flipperoo. To help you securing the piece onto the frame, I added an extra cross member, which is secured by pocket holes, clamped, and then just would screw all the way around. And that really is the main construction of the first half of the shed. Now I'm just adding some shed paint so that it has a bit of color and also some protection as well against the weather. As we're in the UK, there are lots of rain, some sunshine, and potentially some snow as well. I did contemplating painting the interior of it as well, but I decided not to, which was probably a mistake. But here I'm just going through the external boards and then the frame which is exposed to the weather elements. And I later did go on to also paint the OBS board as well, which I don't think did much considering the abuse it went through. Once that's dried, the only thing left for the first half of the shed is the roof lining on the top. And I can't really tell you much because apparently I don't have footage for it, but I pretty much just followed the instructions, and the only thing I can really tell you is that the tar that you put it on is really sticky. So that was part 1 done. 2 is where we are going to build a clamshell style box, so it's going to lift up at the hinge. So I'm just starting off by again splitting more of the 4x2s down into 2x2s and then trimming them to length. I also have a go at my new toy. This is a handheld router and it makes a lot of dust, even with the dust collection on, but it's better with the dust collection obviously. We will see more of it later. This project really have pushed me on how I use my tools and the way I can use them. I found out it's very limited because of I don't have a workshop table, I don't have enough clams, I don't have lots of this, that and the other. So a lot of those will be coming into future videos as builds. For the particular purpose of cutting out slots to do lap joints or half lap joints, I do find the method of just using a circuit saw or the table saw and then cleaning up is easier than using a router because you have more support, or you can add more supports easily. So where shed part 1 and shed part 2 meet, I cut out a 2cm by 2cm strip out from the 2x2, the 2" by 2" with the intent of using that to overlap the shed a little bit to provide better weather protection. This does mean that there is a reduced surface contact instead of being half lapping over each other. Overlapping area only is a quarter of that, which is not very stable. To make sure that it works and I can figure out a way to join the pieces, I did do some prototyping to make sure that it is doable, and it seems like it is at small scale, just a few awkward screwing angles, but that wasn't too bad, so we accepted the design and went on to full build.
That's a way to screw. It works for now. This is a model.
To help with the awkward screwing angle, I did try and make a little bit of a screwing jig, but I don't actually have enough clamps that I can screw onto that angle in particular, which makes it quite difficult to screw accurately. But at least I tried. And thinking about it now, it is obvious that I do need a little bit more overlap than just the piece on top of it. I needed some overhangs on either side to make sure it stays in place. So after a lot of cutting down to shape and figuring out weird and unusual ways of cutting the joints, including some failures along the way, did have a little bit of a boo-boo here, and then we're trying to clean up. We finally get to see what the second half of the shed could look like on one side. Now, because the second half of the shed isn't as square as the first half of the shed, making sure I get the correct angles is a little bit of an issue. And for me, this initial first try was still a little bit of a prototype, so I didn't really sit down and do the maths on what I need for angles and lengths. So I just laid the 3 pieces that I know I've got correct on the floor and then try and use that to figure out what I need for the last 2 longer pieces. So we have a rough layout starting from that corner with a joint-ish thing, and then go to here, go to here. I need to chop this bit off, and then another joint, and then the final connection here. I'm gonna put this together, maybe test this tomorrow, hopefully, because it's dark outside. So try and get that joint sorted today, and then test it tomorrow outside. What we'll do is we'll try and get a lap joint in there, so got a little bit more stability. Let's see how that goes. So I was just doing some assembling, and then I've made a little bit of a boo-boo because I cut this and then the lap joint is on the other side. So I could just trace out this shape here because I don't want to cut another long piece. I have spare wood, but that's just a waste. So I'm going to trace out a shape for this and then use that as a connecting piece for this too. Not ideal, but that's just something what we're gonna have to do. Oh fuck. So it's been a bit longer than I would have wanted. But here is one part that connects this part, and the other part which connects this half. It's a little bit off the angle, but if you press everything down, it might just be okay. So we're gonna screw it up and clean off that edge. So with that, we can finally see what the frame looks like when it's fully assembled and next to the first half of the shed. What's the best word for it? Terrible? It's definitely too long on this side, and because the way I'm connecting this on the top means I'm no longer connecting down there. So what I do need is connect that properly. That needs to go I've got no idea how to do this anymore. And that connection bit as well needs to go. So back to the drawing board, Bishop block. So after that little bit of discovery, I finally decided to go and cut up the entire second half of the clamshell so that I actually know what dimensions to cut, what angle for each piece I need, and the actual joining for it. In the CAD, I added some cross members for the structural integrity of the side panels, although the big issue really is that this box is missing two sides, with pretty much no option to reinforce it because it's needed for access. And here is what it could look like. I still have to figure out the details in here because I still need to actually link the two panels together from the back, but this just gives me an idea of the rough outline first, so then I can then decide whether I want to put in the cross members and if I need more reinforcements after I build one side. Learning from the failure of the first prototype, which I didn't show it on camera because I lost the footage, was that because of the way the quarter lap joint didn't really do its job, I decided to do a tenon and mortise joint to connect the 45-degree angles, which I can then reinforce and then cut out the strip of 2 cm by 2 cm for the overlap later. I tried various methods of cutting the mortise and tenon joint with newly bought tenon saw and chisels, the old trusty circular saw and table saw combination, oscillating multi-tool, router, etc, but I didn't seem to get a very good result. But considering this is my first time doing a 45-degree tenon joint, I can only say it got a little bit better towards the end, but don't judge the start. This also probably compounded a few problems later down the line. So last time I was working on this, I got a little bit distracted, which meant I made a Y and a Y, which is the same. So what I need to do now is cut off this bit and do the female version, and also cut down the length of the other side as well so it matches. So back to time-lapse mode. So I was trying to put together the frame because it's been a while, I've been away and haven't done much, and I was trying to piece back the assembly to remember where I was. I did a thing which is not great. I'm gonna see if I can just glue this back together, and hopefully with the screws and stuff it should be fine. This is not turning up to be a great build. Lots of problems. Lots of problems indeed. As I'm gluing up the broken piece, I'm also gluing up the rest of the joints, and you can see me just shoving in some spare bits of wood into the oversized gaps, but you can also see some gaps which I can't fill at the moment. To reinforce the 135-degree angle joints, once the glue is dried, I drew out 2 holes on each corner and then glue in some dowels. Hopefully this means that it won't break as easily compared to the first prototype anyway, which broke even when I was just lightly handling it. The one side frame didn't break when I was trying to do a quick test fit, so I decided I probably didn't need the cross members. I can just go with the outer frame, and then I went to build the other side of the frame. To be honest, I wasn't particularly happy with the first side because it wasn't quite the angles that I had, but I didn't really have a choice at this point because I was running out of material and I don't know how to fix it. So onto the second side we go, and there was a little bit of an error where I forgot to do one of the joints, so I'm just trying to do it now with the circular saw. In the end, I had to use a whole array of tools to try and get this joint cut, which wasn't great. So this is the vision. So you can that's roughly enough space for this. And from this angle, the front one is really wonk. But you can kind of see the vision. That hole is going to be annoying to try and put in now. It's our option. We don't really have a lot of option. The other side of it is we just give up on the rear frame and just waste a ton of wood. I don't really want to do that, but this has been dragging on for so long. I just kind of want to just put a tarp over it and just call it done. And it's been really challenging with the limitation of my tools, the limitation of the wood, and just weather and timing and trying to get stuff done after work. We'll give it a shot and then see how far we get. If not very far, then we just struggle. Because to be fair, it works quite well if I can just drive in, or rather ride in, after I finish riding, and not have to open and close the garage door. I also want this garage space back as well, as an actual garage, so I can park my car in to keep it a bit free from the bird poos and stuff. So I'm going to try and put that hole in, trying to cut a few bits and pieces, try and fit the top end of that, actually screw the horizontal beam so I have some reference on how to actually attach the frame. Probably will show you guys as well. Over the winter this has kind of cracked, and I think it's because I use wood glue in between the seams where I probably shouldn't have, and that's just cracked entire way through. It also seems to have shifted as well, the positioning. That's bent outwards, so that doesn't help. Could be the wind. I'm not sure why this has happened. Could be because of wood breathing. I'm not particularly familiar with that concept, so I didn't really factor that into the design. Through the back as well, the cracks, the horizontal cracks are everywhere throughout the shed, and there's particularly bad on that side as well. I don't actually see it that much, but yeah, guess we'll start doing some tidy up there, and then try and do some more cutting and get it together. That's the plan anyway. So with that, we crack on and start off with the angled cross beam, and also needing to cut out the hole which I missed and showed you earlier. Now this process is very imperative because I need to make sure that it fits properly and that the joints have a good fit, but I am terrible at doing that, and it's terrible. So I've just made adjustments on one side of the frame, and I was going to start the other side, and I realized that this part has split away from the wood. Not much we can do now at this point. I'm not going to cut that part open and redo it. I'm just going to use some dowels to secure it in place, and hopefully that should be it, because this is dragging on for way too long. My patience is wearing thin, and I just want my garage back at this point. Okay, so how does this weird contraption do with the gluing? It's been a couple of days actually since that blew up, because been away on business trip and busy at work. Looks alright actually. I think it's a little bit wonk now, but it was always a bit wonk, so nothing new there. So once the 3 connecting posts and the 2 frames are ready, I can put some glue in and start to put the 2 sides of the frame together. I did need a little bit of help when I'm trying to put it together, just because the joints aren't tight together, so there's a lot of play, and the size of the frame is just too big even for me to try and reach with my feet. So I got a little help. I think if I did the joints properly and it's stiff, it would have been a lot easier. To avoid it being glued to a weird angle as it sags under its own weight, I just used some of the offcut posts that I had to try and get it roughly level. Success-ish! Right, it is the next day, and the frame is still in one piece, which is quite surprising to me. We'll reinforce it with more struts on this side and that side, and maybe one across here as well, if we've got long enough pieces, which is the big issue, because it is quite wobbly. I don't know what happens if I take off the support pieces. Hopefully they should stay. One and two. Yeah, it's staying okay. It's not the greatest of designs, but it will suffice for now. So I started off with sorting out my offcuts to make sure that they are long enough for them to become cross members, and then use the same method of half lap jointing the cross members to the frame. If I had thought ahead and planned of this earlier on, it probably would have been easier, but it wasn't too bad, surprisingly. Alright, let's have a little break from doing the support struts, which these two went okay. For this one, I think I overzealous a little bit with the drill because I didn't realize it was on the second step instead of the first step. So that might not have gone through, but it should be fine. One thing I have noticed is, since I propped it up properly and have a look, there's a big massive gap on this one. Also on that one there as well, right here. So really that's not a lot supporting it. And the bottom's okay, it's not too bad, but it's also not great. I think you can see slightly crooked turning inwards, but should be fine once it has the support arm in it. There's not much I can do about that at the moment. I'm not going to go through much regarding the rest of the frame here, because it's pretty much the same as what I've already covered before, drilling holes and gluing in the dowel. The only difference in here is that I am adding in some extra sawdust and thin wood veneers in between the gaps, so I fill it out and then sanding it down. And that's pretty much the difference between what I've done so far and what I'm going to do now. With the second frame now built, I can see if it fits in with the first frame and if there are any adjustments I need to make. Yes. So the frame is in. It does fit over the bike, which is good. I probably could have gone a little bit shorter on this end, but no matter. The important thing is, why is there a big massive gap here? And if you look from this side, the entire thing is leaning. That gap gets bigger and bigger as you go up. Whereas this side, you get narrower and narrower as you go up. So from not overlapping on this end to fully overlapping and even cutting it off. So I don't know how well it would do if I try to straighten it. And I don't really know how to do that either. We'll probably pull it back like this so it's a bit tighter. These won't fit either. You can also see there's a big seam as you start from essentially nothing to down here, which means there's a big massive gap there. Is this even worth pursuing anymore? I don't know. I don't know. I'm pretty defeated at this point. Maybe not the best idea to jump straight into a massive project. You have no clue on how things work. But hey, Kinesthetic learner, eh? So I've just done some more measurements down here. I almost need something in the middle here, like I'm doing, to spread it out or close it in. But that's the thing we can't do because of the design. Shit design. That is a 90 degrees. So we can potentially force it. That's closer, but that's still not 90 degrees. And I'm willing to bet that these aren't the angles they're supposed to do to be either. I decided I don't have much to leave if I just carry on and see how far I get. So I'm trying to get some corner reinforcement pieces using a 1-to-1 printout and mocking up with some screws. Okay. One side in, roughly. Let's see if we can force this into here and close that gap. Doesn't look promising, does it? Apparently I forgot to film whether that worked or not, and the answer was not really. So we just skip ahead, and I am trying to install the... So here we're skipping ahead to introduce a crossbeam into the first half of the frame so we can install a hinge to flip the second half of the shed up. This is the first time me doing a hinge like this, or any hinge as a matter of fact, so we're going to go through some trial and errors. Taking inspiration from the doors I have inside my house, I routed out some slots for the hinges to go on the cross piece, and then also routed out a slot and also channels so that there is room for the hinge to move. I have realized I have made an error, as always. With these hinges, the way I've put them, you can only open up to 90 degrees. And my solution to that is to cut a 45-degree angle on the line that way it opened, and that took a few tries on the circular saw to line it up. This, in hindsight, does cause issues because I'm weakening the already weak joint between the three pieces. As well as some aggressive sanding because none of the wood I have is straight or true, to make sure that there is no interference. That seemed to have worked, so it's now time for another test fit. The difference is now that I have the cross member which attaches to the first half of the frame, I get a better idea of how things actually go together, as well as whether it actually lifts up or not, and luckily it does. As I said before, there is a little bit of going inwards of the second half of the frame, so I am going to add a cross member to the bottom of that just after the ramp. And with that, I also built this side. And with that, I also built the wall on the right hand side. And with that, I also built the right hand side of the second half of the shed, which is close to the house, so I'm not going to have access to that. Compared to the first time I did it, I now have a router with a trim bit, so I can just oversize the slats and clean it up with that. There were a few bits which took a few tries, presumably because of some knots in the wood or reverse growth or what it's called, but I did manage to get all of those at the end. This fits mostly fine. It seems like it's in mostly, which is good. So we'll just try and lift this up somehow and then install the fixings. Or rather the one fixing, because one of these bad boys are 1200 newtons, which is probably enough on its own to do one, so I probably don't need both. It's probably gonna go here and then attaches to something like down there. So my silly idea of trying to lift the second half of the shed up and also hold it in place is to use my telescopic ladder. Now, you don't need to be a genius to see that the ladder only has 2 legs and is not really intended for anything like this. But no normal person would have a forklift just lying around in their home, so this really is the best that I can do. I am quite lucky that it didn't just fall off down there, and I did manage to just push it back in enough so that I can screw it in and secure it in place. The second piece of the puzzle, and the most important part of this entire build, is putting up the pneumatic spring so that it can support its own weight and I can open and close the second half of the shed. Now, apparently, you can't just attach a gas spring willy-nilly to 2 points and hope it does that. Before the battery dies, bit of an issue. The joint there has cracked. This thing looks bent, which is not a good sign. That thing looks bent, which is also not a good sign. I can try and do it on the other side. Hopefully it's a little bit more stable. The good news is that it actually can support the weight. The bad news is because it doesn't work, as I can't close it and the gas spring is bent, I now have to unscrew it and try and take it apart. Which... Ow. I can't say that was a complete surprise, as I don't have any method of stopping it from falling on me as I'm retracting the steps. That could have happened. And that could have happened a lot earlier. Luckily, I was wearing a helmet because working under heavy things that could fall on you is not a good idea. I don't know why I'm doing this project, but we're going to carry on. Ever since that, I have been a lot more careful about when I am trying to maneuver the clamshell up and down. Over the course of the project, I have managed to do that a fair few times, but I wasn't incident-free, unfortunately. After a couple of attempts of trying to put the gas strut on, I decided that the gas struts I have right now are a lost cause, and I'm just gonna carry on working on the shed until I get some new ones. So I started off with the back panel of the shed, and again trying to use the router with a flush trim bit to try and clean it up. It is a little bit more difficult when you're trying to flush trim something that's not square, but I managed to make it work. One detail that you might not have noticed is that the bottom of the back end of the shed is using a 90-degree angle because I intend to use that as a bit of a finger hole so I can lift it up easier. So I also routed out a slot for that. Amazon just came along. So these are our new gas springs, which should hopefully be able to get it to a spot where we can open and close it. Quite a bit shorter, but still not really doable by body weight at the moment. We're trying to keep the same kind of distance because we already got this hole. We don't want to weaken this side anymore. To be fair, we don't really want to do that to this side either, but if we put that here, that's where that's going to go. Just a little technique to try and estimate the minimum length that is going to be when it's compressed, and let's see whether it holds up the weight, shall we? Yeah, that's not holding the weight. It's also longer than expected. Oh no, because it was here, wasn't it? So that needs to be here. Options, we try the other one. Now that we've got more weight, it might work better. unfortunately didn't do better because I didn't just put one of the gas springs in, I put two to try and stop the gas springs from bending and get an even pressure from both sides. But then I forgot that actually increases the force required to close it, and actually it is still bending the gas strut, so that didn't quite work. Well, that could have been a lot worse. Right. With the thing falling on me twice now, we decided not to go with a dangerous plan. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn this entire side into a door. So what I'm going to do is going to create a beam on this side, add a hinge, and then unscrew the plank, so then this becomes the side. And then this will also have a lifting panel as well, just a moving roof essentially. As you could probably guess, I was not best pleased that this project tried to murder me a couple of times. So in order to try and reduce that, we are changing plans to try and make this a little bit safer. It's raining, I better go. I cut out some scrap pieces to fill in between the horizontal planks so they become new vertical planks to support the door structure. We place the broken panels on the front and then cut the panel free from the frame. With the bike now having to go in the frame, I can't put the support on the bottom anymore, so I put in a support on the top, added in a little bit of roof so everything is roughly in place, and then started building up the left hand side of the side panel and then trimming it down to size. I then added some hinges onto the door so that it now functions as a door, as well as adding a hook and a latch so that the door can remain closed. Although as you can see, because nothing is straight, it's being forced a little bit. I can also now show you how the roof felt is being done that I couldn't show you the first time around. Essentially apply the tar, put a cut piece of roofing sheet on top, trim it down, and then nail it down. I also did the moving roof part as well, and I did it in the garage so I don't have to climb up onto the shed after it's being assembled, because I'm not sure whether that's still going to be an available option for me afterwards. I did initially pre-install the hinges onto the roof side, but actually I found it easier to uninstall them, put it on a frame, and then slide the roof back up so that everything is aligned. Ow. So, from about last week, the bike shed is now mostly done, except for a couple of things. One, there's a gap here, which extends to a gap there, and also big massive gap here, and big massive gap there, and also a bit of the gap on the roof as well. You see that big massive light poking through? This almost just fell on my head just now. This little big piece. Actually, it was behind the part where it moves. So I think what we're going to try and do is to use this part, attach it there, and then another attachment point here, so we can try and get this pneumatic spring working and let it hold its weight up and not fall on my head anymore. Right, see if that works. Looks like it worked. Okay. At least now there's some guarantee of safety-ish. Don't know how You can see that, but it's just swaying ever so slightly in the wind. So if that attachment wasn't there, then it could fall on my head again. But now we're just going to do a bit of protective paint. I know we haven't quite finished yet, especially with the gaps, but might as well protect what we have now, so it doesn't fall apart in the future if we go and fix those gaps.
Several months later.
Right, I thought I did a little bit more recording, but I haven't. So it's been a couple months since last time. Haven't done anything to it, but if I open this up, this, for whatever reason, is no longer supporting its own weight. So that's fun, which means that now I am at danger of being smushed every single time I use this. So it's probably now not fit for purpose anymore. The door has been destroyed, or the latch has been destroyed for whatever reason. This has started coming out again for no apparent reason. Similar on this side, and you can also see the joint here has cracked, which is not great. So it was just one day suddenly, it was just like out on its side, and I've got no idea why. I don't know whether this is all fixable at all or not. But I have done what I can on this project. I'm not going to touch it. It is now November. Its riding season is pretty much over for this year. I will see what I can do to fix this part, which is really annoying. I might need another one of those pneumatic springs. I think the wind didn't help it. It probably needs some reinforcements. But if it's not holding up there, then it's really no use to me at all. Yeah, so now I have a gap, but I have done this video for long enough. I'm not going to do any more on it. I might put some updates on what happens to this in the new year, but if I keep doing this like I did for the first part of the shed, second part of the shed, and put it all in one video, it's never going to end because there's just so much work to do. So this is where we are. We're just going to call it a day, and I'll see you guys on the next video of Make Yourself War, Master of None. Bye.